Okay, in class, we addressed the issue of role of World War I and long-term cause for the 9/11 attacks. So we're looking primarily in this section. In class, I wanted you to read the three documents and then complete a chart. So really the point I try to make here is that there are some World War I causes that kind of lead to the shaping of Al-Qaeda's ideology. Looking at this particular article here, what is Osama talking about? Notice the date. It is a month after 9/11, and he mentions here the Sykes-Picot Agreement and that the sword fell upon America 80 years ago. So really what I want you thinking about for World War One is how does World War One act as an indirect or long-term cause for the 9/11 attacks or Al-Qaeda's ideology or some of the stuff that Osama bin Laden and his followers are, are thinking about and saying in some of their speeches. So we have three documents here: the Balfour Declaration, Sykes-Picot, and the Hussein-McMahon Accords. And when we look pretty much here at the Balfour Declaration, which is, I would say, the British going to the Zionist movement, and the Zionist leaders are trying to create a home for the Jewish people. In this document, let's see, His Majesty's government, which is a reference to the British, because it's their document going to the Zionist leaders, that they favor the establishment in Palestine as a home for the Jewish people. Notice how it also says that the people living in Palestine, you can't do anything to prejudice their civil and religious rights of non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So I'm going to do a quick search here for, let's see, Israel and Palestine. Let's see what comes up. I'm just going to go to news here. So we feel betrayed. Palestinians fear cause of Arab states. Israel and Palestine restart talks. How the world reacted to Britain and Israel normalizing ties, and so on. So really the only point I'm trying to address here is that if we want to look at World War One, keep in mind I'm not addressing any claims to land prior to World War One. I'm primarily just looking at World War One. How can World War One contribute to, the further complexities with regard to this issue? All right, so let's take a look at another one. And this is the French and the British governments and how they are looking at the the Arab side. If you don't recall, the Arabs fought alongside of the British during World War One, and according to the Hussein-McMahon letters, which is what this is about, subject to the above modifications, Britain is prepared to recognize and support the independence of the Arabs in all regions within the limits demanded by the Sharif of Mecca. So who are they referring to? They are referring to this guy. This is a map of the Ottoman Empire. And if you do not recall, the Arabs were an oppressed group within the Ottoman Empire. So the Sharif Hussein, this individual right here, wants to be able to help fight with the British and the French and bring the Arabs in some sort of fight against the Ottoman Empire on the condition that he is going to get territory here. Notice in this document, it doesn't really specify any land claims. It just says the regions within the limits demanded by the Sharif of Mecca. Well, if I was this guy, I would probably claim all of them. Why? Because the document is really just allowing me that particular flexibility. It doesn't say anything. It's not saying, we're going to support the independence of the Arabs in this particular area. So this pretty much is saying all of the promises that the British are going to make on the condition that the Arabs come along the side of the British and fight the Ottoman Empire from within. To further complicate things, you also have an agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which is an agreement between the British and the French. And once again, we have more land claims. If you notice up here, it says French rule, British rule. And I think the point I want you to take from today's class is really this map here, which is a Treaty of Versailles map, mandates in Arabia. And notice how when we look at the Ottoman Empire, it's pretty much the same map here. This is one that's from the treaty. And what I want you to focus on here is Syria, Iraq, underneath proposed French mandate, proposed British mandate, proposed British mandate. That pretty much the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I gets distributed. The Arabs don't get any land. The Jewish people don't get any land. And at the end, this simply becomes a British and French control of the region. And that right there is going to lead to some Arab resentment. And then to further complicate things at the end of World War II, the UN will create the State of Israel, which is going to prompt all of these surrounding Arab states to attack Israel, which is going to be the focus point for the Arab-Israeli conflict for the rest of this class, because you will see a series of attacks with regard to this particular issue. whether we're talking about the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, this particular organization right here. Country of origin is in Gaza. Keep in mind, Gaza is a part of Israel. This is a disputed region. Kind of goes, with regard to territory and war changes, land claims. So what you see here is the country of origin, and then you see the goal. If we're looking at Black September, the group that was responsible for the Munich Olympics and the Dawson Field hijacking, again, you see, issue with Israel, people acting in the name of the Palestinian cause. And this has the country of origin for Jordan. This is an image of the Munich massacre at the Olympics. And of course, Israel responds with Operation Wrath of God, and it brings up the question whether a nation has a right to defend itself. So pretty much with these slides here is just looking at terrorist attacks. And it really is an issue of, is this ever going to be resolved? If we were in class, I would have handed out a series of these cards and you would have been partnered up with somebody. In this particular case, somebody is Israel and somebody's playing the role of the Fatah group. So you have your summary, and your goal here, if you're this group, is to achieve a Palestinian state on land occupied by Israel. The goal on this side is do not give up land unless they remove their ties with terrorism and replace their current leadership. So I really don't see how these two issues can get resolved. On this side, they're going to say, you're a terrorist organization, you need to, revise your leadership. And over here, they're saying, well, we are not a terrorist organization. We are just fighting for land. So once again, the issue of land claims comes up, which is why I wanted to focus on this particular slideshow here, looking at World War One. One thing that I did not address or get into much. So here we see some of the land disputes and the claims and the changes of territory. When we're looking at this particular map here, Israel and Palestinian lands. The Palestinian lands are in green, and you notice that they kind of shrink, and that comes at the expense of Israeli occupied lands. And some people would have problems with using that language of occupied. Anyway, our focus here is just to look at the tension between these two sides. One thing that I did not mention is that at the end of World War I, Ibn Saud, unites these kingdoms in what will become Saudi Arabia. Why is Saudi Arabia important? Because that is where the Wahhab movement originates from, and the Wahhab is the interpretation of Islam that is looking for a purification of the religion, which is why I use the glasses of water in class. Keep in mind, this is a reference from bin Laden's fatwa, his 98 declaration of war. And he says the devastation inflicted on the Iraqi people by the Crusader Zionist alliance. So here he is referencing the Crusades, and here he is referencing the Zionist movement. It could be possible to interpret this as Christians and Jews are in an alliance together fighting against Muslims. And bin Laden definitely had to have viewed himself as somebody fighting back. So that's it for the World War I contribution to shaping of 9/11 and Al-Qaeda's ideology. And that's it.